So, how'd it go? Were you able to lay out the columns using the CSS display property? Even if you got some of it done, that's still great. So, now I'm going to show you the method I used. In the HTML, the primary and secondary column divs each share the class call. So, inside the media query in my CSS, I created a new rule that targets the class call, and I added a light gray background color so you're able to see exactly how the display property affects the column layout. First, I displayed the columns as inline block. Remember, inline elements do not accept a width value. And I wanted two equal width columns, so I set both columns' width value to 50%, so they each take up half the space inside their container. Let's take a look at this in the browser. Well, it looks like the second column is still below the first column. The columns are not displaying side by side like I want them to. So remember the default white space the browser displays between inline and inline block elements? Since the div columns are displayed as inline block, that extra space created by the browser breaks the column layout. So now I'm going to add a negative right margin to the columns, like I did earlier in the navigation items. Back in the call rule, I'll add a margin right property, and I'll set the value to -4 pixels. The negative margin pulls the columns toward each other to close the gaps. So now they're both on the same line. If you've made it this far in the challenge, great job. So when you lay out multiple elements side by side with inline block display, the vertical alignment might look different if the elements have varying heights, like these columns do. So you may notice that some elements are vertically aligned to the bottom, while others are aligned to the top. And we can see it happening here in the secondary content column. It's vertically aligned to the bottom edge of the container. Fortunately, this is easy to fix. So the best way to adjust the alignment of an inline block element is using the vertical align property. In my call rule, I'll add the vertical aligned property, and I'm going to set the value to top. So my columns will be vertical aligned to the top of their container. So let's take a look. I'll save the style sheet, refresh the page, and if I resize the browser, we can see how the second column is now perfectly aligned with the top margin of the first column. Finally, I want to create more separation between the columns to make the content a little easier to read. In web design, the spaces between columns are called gutters. So to create small gutters between each column in my layout, I'm going to use left and right padding values. Back in my call rule, I'm going to add a padding left property and set the value to 1em. And I'll add a padding right property and set the value to 1em as well. And now I'm going to remove the light gray background color from the content columns. All right, and that's all there is to it. As you can see, we have two perfectly aligned content columns with a nice gutter in between. So keep up the good work, and I'll see you again in the next section.